So I saw an interesting interview with Frank Smith discussing Anthony Joshua and his financial stake in Matchroom. There was great insight. So I want to give the boxing philosophy perspective. So let's open that door. I'm going to explore over 12 ideas. So the first idea is that AJ, Anthony Joshua, is Matchroom's only outside shareholder. So no other fighter on the stable has this stake. First question, what is a shareholder? A shareholder is an individual, company or institution that owns at least one share of stock in the company. So that means that AJ's relationship with Matchroom, it's a different relationship. It's a special relationship. AJ is invested not only in the growth of him as a boxer, not only in the growth of him as an entrepreneur, but also the growth of him as a company, because he has shares in that company. Imagine being a shareholder in the job that you work in. Your perspective changes. You are driving not for yourself, or not only for yourself. You are now have a different type of motivation. So Anthony and Joshua having shares means that his perspective is different. It means that his motivation is different. And also it means that his checks are different. And the second idea is Frank Smith confirms it's a unique arrangement, not a standard purse deal. So the premise here, it's not a standard purse deal. So let's define a standard purse deal. I'm going to break this down into 3 examples. So example number 1 is a journeyman. Boxer A receives £2,000 guaranteed purse to fight on a local show. Very standard. The second example is the prospect. Boxer B signs a contract for 20 grand, guaranteed purse, win or lose. And then the third example is the world title fight. So you've got Boxer C is guaranteed 1 million, while Boxer D is guaranteed 600,000 with no additional revenue sharing unless specified in the contract. So with Anthony Joshua, he'll be at the upper end, but he doesn't have a standard purse deal because he is a shareholder. So he has a bigger financial stake. So the third idea, every other fighter, including Conor Benn, operates typically on a purse per fight terms. Let's break down what that can mean. So for example, fight 1, £5,000 purse. The boxer earns £5,000 for that fight. Let's now take a title fight example. So a title fight, £500,000 purse for a championship fight. The boxer agrees to a £500,000 for that single event. Now let's take Conor Benn. Now Conor Benn, being an A-side fighter, he will get money on the back end. What does that mean? Well, that means he can get money on pay-per-view, live gate, and sponsorship. So pay-per-view, he could get a percentage. I'm just making this figure up on the top of my head. Let's say 10%. Live gate, that's the tickets that are sold at the actual live event. So we could get a percentage of that. And then sponsorship, he can get a significant percentage from the sponsorships. And the sponsorships, there's substantial money in sponsorship. So when you're an A-side fighter, you don't just get the standard 5 grand, 10 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand. You get money through the front door and also money on the back door. And with Anthony Joshua, you can add that extra layer because of that shareholder element. Idea number 4, Matchroom's actual profit margin is just 15%. So AJ's equity is a bet on a tight margin business. So that's their perspective. This is my perspective. Is 15% a tight margin business? To me, this depends if it's net or gross profit. Also, remember, Anthony Joshua will be getting all the other elements. So he's getting a fight purse, he's getting pay-per-view, he's getting a percentage of the live gate, he's getting sponsorships. So this is just an additional slice of the pie. So I'm not sure if that profit margin is a tight business. Typically, when you look at other businesses like supermarkets, they operate with 2 to 5% net profit, very high sales volume, but very low margins. Restaurants is 3 to 10% net profit. Food, wages and rent make margins relatively tight, or let's be honest, very tight. But a software company, also I believe known as an SaaS, is a 15 to 30% net profit. So when you look at those three different businesses, you can see that a software company has the biggest margins, and that's probably based on a variety of things. There's no bricks and mortar. There's less wages. There may not be rent, or there's less rent. And therefore, if you have to divide the pie, if there's less slices to take out of the pie, then your pie becomes bigger. And the fifth idea is that AJ's wealth is now tied to Matchroom's performance, not just his own fights. I think this is how good business run, because it's a mutual interest. A mutual interest is always a good way to accelerate a business. Think of this. Imagine if you was to write a book and then someone just gives you 50 grand and that's it. You can't make any more. There's no real incentive to really push that book to sell. But imagine if you're given a £5,000 advance, but then you're given a 50% royalty. Maybe let's say a 60 or 70 or 80% royalty. That is an incentive-driven business to make you go out there and really market this book and really try to sell it, because there's a mutual interest for everyone involved. So because part of AJ's wealth is tied to the infrastructure of Matchroom as a shareholder, he now is operating not just as that entrepreneur, or he is operating as that entrepreneur, he is operating as that boxer, but he also has this additional business hat where he wants to see his career propel, but he also wants to see Matchroom propel, because when Matchroom makes more money, he makes more money. So then idea number 6, Frank Smith calls himself a walking spreadsheet behind Eddie Hearn's deals. Me personally, I'm not a fan of spreadsheets, but they're essential for most businesses, especially businesses that are built to scale. I guess I'm assuming this is Frank Smith's strength. That's one of the major strengths that he brings to the table. I guess there's nothing more really to say there, other than to acknowledge that within capitalism, within businesses, businesses that operate at a certain scale will need spreadsheets. Idea number 7, Conor Benn left via email. No sit down with Eddie Hearn. AJ never came close to that. So here's a question when we talk about Conor Benn. Was it friendship, or was it just business, or was it a combination of both? You could make an argument that Eddie Hearn's loyalty went beyond business. He put his credibility on the line. I know some people are joking and saying Eddie Hearn doesn't have credibility, but he clearly does. He has leverage, he has expertise, and in the boxing world, he has massive credibility, and he put that on the line. Conor taking the money from Zuffa, to me, is not the issue. Conor Benn is supposed to negotiate the best deal. Perhaps it's the action he took or the action he didn't take. The face-to-face would have been essential in terms of handling things in a mature way. I don't know why Conor Benn didn't engage with this face-to-face. Maybe he has a justifiable reason. I'm not sure. But I think there's a question of, if business is just business and it's just ruthless, it's just snakes and ladders, then conducting yourself in an ethical way doesn't matter. But if ethics do matter, and if conduct matters, and if being a gentleman matters, if someone stands by you, then you have that conversation. Remember, it's about being ethical to people that have been ethical with you. If someone snaked you, then you have no moral obligation. That makes sense. But if someone stands by you, and then you're going to make a transition, you're going to change direction, then ethically it feels you owe that person an explanation. You owe that person a conversation. Perhaps from Conor Benn's perspective, he stands by himself. He is kind of portraying himself like the bad guy. He's kind of reveling over that. I wonder for Conor, what's more important? What does he value more, the money or the loyalty? Or does he simply see it through the filter that this is just business? I guess from Eddie Hearn's perspective, for him, when he stood by Conor, was that just business, or was that a friendship? Idea number 8, Frank says more fighters leaving the Zuffa money or leaving for Zuffa money is going to happen again. Zuffa, which I believe the figurehead of Zuffa, the face behind Zuffa, or one of the faces is Dana White. And Zuffa has large resources in boxing and in life in general. Money talks, let's be honest. In capitalism, money speaks volumes. In capitalism, money shouts. And Zuffa's money is attracting many different boxers. I guess the important thing to consider is what happens in the end if Zuffa gets a stranglehold or a monopoly into boxing's infrastructure. Idea number 9, UFC fighters take 17 to 90% revenue versus boxers 60 to 70% revenue. I didn't understand what this meant at first, and then I broke it down. So this is my understanding. So example 1, so UFC, their event revenue means 100 million, fighters receive 18%, that's 18 million, and therefore UFC keeps 82 million to cover costs, invest in the business, and generate profit. Where in the example 2 of boxing, the event revenue is 100 million, the boxers receive 65%, that's 65 million, and promoters keep 35 million before paying event costs and other expenses. So in a sense, what we're seeing here is that UFC keeps more money for the platform. And what's important to decipher, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? In a sense, when we look at boxing, we see the largest share, the 65%. But it's important to remember that that 65% is mainly disseminated among the 1%. So it's not shared equally, which makes sense in a meritocracy because the boxers with the biggest brand get paid more. But when you look at that without context, it makes boxing's infrastructure look much, much more favorable. But I think when you break down the nitty gritty and the minor details, I'm not saying it creates a different outcome, but I think the nuance here is really important. And it's a good question. Which infrastructure is more ethical, UFC or boxing? Idea number 10, Dana White reportedly fixates on attacking Eddie Hearn specifically. The question you have to ask yourself is why? This is my perspective. This is perhaps because attacking Eddie Hearn is free promotion. It's massive promotion. If you attack Eddie Hearn responds, and then you get all those promotions. So when Eddie Hearn is generating hundreds of thousands of views, maybe millions of views, he's promoting the Zuffa machine, and he's also promoting his own machine. He's marketing for everyone. And like I said, Eddie Hearn responds because it's additional promotion. He is a willing participant in this verbal battle. The promotion, what does it do? It builds both platforms. It continues to build Matchroom, and it continues to build Zuffa, and it creates a new algorithm for Zuffa, which is starting to develop, and it continues to build on the Matchroom algorithm, and perhaps it creates a separate algorithm of Zuffa and Matchroom. The point here is that this is marketing, this is promotion. And when you're selling a product or selling a service, marketing is essential. Idea number 11, AJ versus Fury is signed but undated. To me that I'm assuming this is an assumption that there are signatures from AJ and Tyson Fury, and I'm assuming that the percentages and the payments in terms of what they're going to be paid, in terms of the purse and what they're going to get paid through the back door, I'm assuming that's already been agreed. And a contract being undated, I wonder if that's a common practice, because it sounds weird, it sounds awkward, but maybe that's common practice. I feel like there is probably more negotiations to be had because there's all this talk about the venue. So maybe there's more, maybe this contract is going to get redrafted. And again, it's probably common practice for contracts to be redrafted. When you're talking literally millions upon millions, if a fight is worth, say, 300 million, 500 million, there's going to be redrafting. There's going to be agreements, disagreements, And that's a very complicated and complex piece of work. Idea number 12, a 4 billion Zuffa bid could outvalue any single purse AJ has ever earned. This goes back to this whole premise that Zuffa has massive amounts of money. My question is, will they always have this level of cash? When does Zuffa need to start recouping, or can they lose money for the next 20 years? At the present time, it appears that the Zuffa money train keeps going and going and going. But you would think that the recouping process needs to begin. Of course, when you're playing with vast amounts of money, then you have projections. You're playing in a different jungle. It's a different capitalist jungle that they're playing. But again, surely, even when you have huge resources, surely there's always a limit. And idea 13, AJ stayed loyal through title losses and rebuilds. Equity, not just sentiment, may explain it. Clearly, there's a special relationship between Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua. And that special relationship manifests not just in an emotional level, but also in an economic level. And to me, that makes perfect sense. And if you look at boxing as a jungle, and many people do, and many people see it as an unruly jungle, and many see boxing as being extremely corrupt, whether that premise is true, maybe there's elements of corruption, but is it extremely corrupt? Because that's two distinctive things. But in a jungle of corruption, in a jungle of chaos, for me personally, it's nice to see people that can rely on each other and that are loyal to each other. Because in a jungle full of snakes, that loyalty has extreme value. And after Eddie Hearn's situation with Conor Benn, and I'm not saying Conor Benn is wrong because we might not know the little details, he probably values that loyalty much more. Sometimes we have to go through situations with other people to value what other people bring to the table. Because sometimes you can take loyalty for granted. And it's an exceptional currency, figuratively speaking. And the 14th idea is that no other heavyweight or no other current heavyweight has this ownership arrangement with a promoter. That is my understanding. However, when we're looking at the Zuffa contracts, I wonder if those contracts are different. How are they luring in all these boxers? Is it just massive money on the front end? Or is there equity? Is there shares? To me, to bring in so much talent and to bring in so many fighters that are clearly have great branding, a fighter with great branding should have a great promoter that's able to really negotiate at a very high level. So I wonder, what are the deals that are being struck with Zuffa Boxing? Because if I was a promoter, I would be trying to negotiate, I would be trying to negotiate some type of stock in the company. I'll be trying to negotiate more than just a massive payment, because a big payment is a given. You are the A side, your brand is being leveraged for this platform, but you'd want to negotiate other variables. So it'd be interesting to understand what these contracts entail. Okay, so I'm going to round this up with 5 questions. Question number 1. Is AJ's loyalty to Matchroom driven by friendship or by his financial stake in the company? I'm assuming that AJ and Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, I'm assuming AJ and Eddie Hearn have a friendship. And when you have a friendship with someone and when you do good business with someone, that can evolve into a better situation. So to have a financial stake in the company, clearly you're not going to have a financial stake in the company unless you're a massive asset. But when you mix being a huge brand, a massive asset, with real genuine friendship and loyalty, then those type of situations are easier to negotiate. It'd be interesting to know when that financial stake in the company was negotiated. I'm assuming it wasn't negotiated purely at the beginning of the journey. I'm assuming it was negotiated later in AJ's journey. And if that's so, that kind of shows Anthony Joshua's entrepreneurial understanding or entrepreneurial expertise or entrepreneurial guidance. There's various elements to that. Question 2. Does being a shareholder give Anthony Joshua more power than a traditional per fight contract? I think it gives him more leverage. He probably has more of a say in the direction of Matchroom. And I think it gives him more power. It probably gives him more influence. However, that's speculation. But it definitely has the potential to give him much, much more money. Question number 3. Is Matchroom's reported 15% margin strong or dangerously tight for a boxing promoter? I'm not a business expert, so I can't really answer that question. However, when we will look, first of all, to properly answer that question, you need to know if it's net. So you need to understand the process, if it's net or gross, number one. So you have to understand the proper context. And secondly, when we put it up to those 3 other businesses, it didn't seem disproportionately bad. So it might not be the best business model in terms of margins, but it wasn't the weakest business model in terms of margins either. Clearly, in a business or in a society where there's inflation, there's going to be lots of danger. And when you're dealing with millions, there's going to be lots of risk. Because when you're putting on these mega events, you could be paying 20 million, 30 million, 40 million. And if you don't recoup via the live gate, the pay-per-view, and the sponsorships, then you're operating at a loss. And when you're operating at a loss, your business is potentially in trouble. Question number 4. Will Zuffa's financial power force more fighters to abandon long-term relationships for bigger purses? Again, it depends how big. It depends how big these purses are. It looks like Zuffa is just offering out massive amounts of money. And these boxers, these A-side boxers they should have a great team behind them that should be able to negotiate optimal contracts. Maybe the more interesting question will be, how long will Zuffa continue to offer out these very favorable contracts? Is this something that just happens for the first 2 years and then be phased out, or will this happen for the next 5 or 10 years? And how much of a loss can they operate on? How long can they operate on a loss, assuming that they are operating on a loss? And again, they'll be leveraging the brands of these boxers with regards to sponsorships, live gates, pay-per-views, etc. And then finally, question 5, is AJ delaying the Fury fight as a boxer, or is he protecting Matchroom's interests as a shareholder? I think the premise that AJ is delaying Tyson Fury fight may be untrue. And if he was delaying it, it would only be to get some more warm-up fights to give him a greater chance of victory. Clearly, the AJ Tyson Fury fight is economically so powerful that it will generate a massive amount of money. Anthony Joshua, massive financial infrastructure. Tyson Fury, huge financial infrastructure. The entities surrounding them, huge financial infrastructures. There is money to be made all round. Of course, things need to be properly negotiated, but I'm not sure the premise is true that AJ is delaying the fight. I actually think that AJ really wants this fight. But as in anything, engaging in war, timing is a crucial factor. So that's the end of the video. Now I'm trying to build a digital boxing community. And that means I'm interested in your thoughts, I'm interested in your perspectives, and I'm interested in your observations. Now, if you want to support the channel, press like, hype, and subscribe. And if you want to watch more content like this, then simply click here or click here. As always, thanks for your time. It is much appreciated.